Before we transition to dashboards, we're going to create one more view, and it's one that's a little bit different from what we've done before, and that is a side-by-side bar chart. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new sheet, and I'm going to go back to the Show Me tab and look at what I need for a side-by-side bar. And again, I notice here that I need one or more dimensions, one or more measures, and that it requires at least 3 fields. Now in this case here, what I want to do is I want to look at both the achievement and the growth score by subgroup within my districts. And I'm going to start here by selecting the school name, as well as the achievement score and the growth score. And I also want my subgroup there. And again, I'm using my control click to make sure that these all stay selected. And if I look over here, my side-by-side bars matches up, and I'm going to go ahead and select it. And what I end up with here, first of all, I want to note that it automatically created the same filter for me that I had before with my LEA name. And here I see a separate bar for each school with an achievement score and a growth score, and there's also a subgroup in there. Now, just like we saw before, we have a ton of rows and we have to do a lot of scrolling to see anything here. So I'm going to flip this to where I can scroll down. And again, I'm going to do that by going up here to where it says Swap Rows and Columns. And I want to pause here to take a look at my different cards. So Tableau automatically generated a few things for me here whenever I selected the side-by-side bar graph. Notice here in my rows, I have subgroup, followed by school name, and followed by measure names. And my measure names in this case is the combination of the 2 values that I selected down here in the measures. That's my achievement score and my growth score. And if I selected more than those 2 measures, those would appear right here. So let's take a look back here at our rows card. And we have these 3 values here that are representing the dimensions. And Tableau is defaulted to have it in an order where it goes subgroup, then school name, and then the measure name. But let's say I wanted to reverse the position of the subgroup and the school name to have all of the subgroups for one school appear before I see another school. I can very easily change that by just switching the order up here. And if I click and drag school name over, notice here I have that little orange drop arrow. When I click and drag that, now I have all of the subgroups for that particular school name. Now, I also notice here I've got a lot of blank spots as I go through all of my subgroups. And if I recall, I actually have a filter on the previous tab here under my heat map where I had an SPG score had to be at least 1. So it would filter out any bars that are blank. Well, I can do the same thing that I did with my LEA name filter and apply this to all the worksheets using this data source. And since my new sheet down here has the same, notice all of those blank spots go away, and I now have this SPG score filter. So that's another clever way where it's going to save me time by linking filters across sheets. While I'm out of here, I'm also going to change this to a name that means something. I'm going to change this to my side-by-side bars. And then finally here, I want to eliminate all of the scrolling for the user. If I notice here, I've got to do a lot of scrolling if I'm looking for a particular school and I want to see the different subgroup performance there. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in a filter for the school name. Now, if I throw in a filter for the school name and I'm only looking at one at a time, I really don't need it here anymore. So I'm actually going to take the school name from the rows card and drag it over to the filters. Now here it's going to come up with this custom value list. I'd rather have it select from a list. I notice all of my school names here and I hit OK. This hasn't really done anything yet. All it's done is aggregate my, and that's because I haven't really selected any schools. I want the user to be able to select those schools. So I can right click on here, show the filter, have it come over here. And just like we learned in the last session, I don't want to see all of the schools for every district in the data set. I only want to see them for the current district. And so if I click on this arrow and I go to only relevant values, it's going to limit my choices. And to make this look a little bit cleaner, I'm going to have this be a single value dropdown. Now finally here, I still have this all value. Again, remember, if I want to remove the all value, I don't want to be able to see all schools at once because I don't want that aggregation to happen. And I'm going to remove that by going to this dropdown, going to Customize, and then deselecting the Show All value. Okay, now that I've made these changes, I want to make sure that my title is explaining the plot correctly. So I'm going to change my title here, and I'm going to switch this now to my both my LEA name. I'll put a dash in, and then put in the school name. And this is the achievement and growth scores. So these are the SPG, School Performance Grade Component Scores by subgroup for 2018-19. And when I select that here, notice it's automatically going to adjust to both the LEA that I've selected in my filter and the school that I've selected. And if I change my school over here, it's going to change the values down here. Now, just like I had in the previous example with the crosstab, I've got a lot of white space this time at the bottom. And I can easily, this is a good candidate. It looks like it could expand a little bit there. I'm going to go ahead and fit the height. And that's going to have my bar graph now take up the entire view. And now that I've done this, I've talked about here that I have these SPG component scores. I've got achievement and I have growth. Let's also add the final SPG score. And I can easily do that here. I want it to appear just like the achievement and the growth score. So I'm going to take the full SPG score and I'm going to click and drag it over to the measure values. And now it's automatically going to populate among the measure names. And now it appears here as a separate bar. Okay, before we finish, let's add a few more features to this graph. One thing I'd like to do is add a label to the end of each bar that lets me know the score associated with it. And I can easily do that here by clicking on label and show mark labels. And these extra decimal points at the end really don't have a lot of meaning to me. And I actually want to round these to the nearest whole number. And I can actually do that all at once here for the achievement growth and the SPG score by using my control click feature here over in the measures card. Right click, then go to default properties, number format, and then go to number custom and change it to 0 decimal places. And when I hit OK, it's going to automatically change my labels to be the nearest whole number value. Let's add a few more features here to change this axis. If I'm flipping between school names, Tableau is going to automatically change the values in this x-axis. And this may be good for me if I have something that I need to change the scale on. But in this case, since I'm comparing schools against each other within the same district, I kind of want to have that axis be consistent so I'm not drawing the wrong conclusions. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to fix this axis to be going from 0 to 100 every time. I can easily do that here by right-clicking, clicking on Edit Axis, and it's going to bring up a menu for me here. And I'm going to change it instead of automatic to be fixed. I'm going to have my fixed start at 0 and change my fixed end to 100. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to add a title for the axis that makes a little bit more sense to the reader than value. And I'm going to change that to the School Performance Grade Score for Component. I click on the X there, and now my graph axis is fixed. And then finally here, I'm going to change this SPG score. It's kind of nondescript, and this actually means the total score. So I'm going to really just change the name over here. I have my measures. I'm going to click on SPG score, right click there and rename it, and just rename it to SPG total score. And this is going to then change that label here, and it's going to change it over in the legend as well, and then for any other sheets that I'm using this particular variable in. So that's 4 distinct sheets from the subgroup school performance grade dataset. In the next videos, we're going to be taking these sheets and building them into dashboards.